Welcome to the video presentation of my Coattail Course 5 final project. I'll let Nathan explain what we did.
Today, we will take a step back in time to visit heroes of the Christian faith. We will use our time machine to take us back to be able to interact with men and women of faith who will each share their own story. Stories of greatness, stories of overcoming major life challenges, stories of taking God's message of all love into all the world. Come with us for a fascinating time of hearing firsthand what God has been doing through His people during history. Visiting with these heroes of faith will encourage and challenge each one of us to consider the biblical values we want to emulate in our own lives. So let's go.
In this unit, I wanted to transform my teaching by having students actively involved in the teaching and the learning. They each became a character from history, shared their personal stories, and responded to questions both local and globally. This project incorporates goals set for both myself and my students. Personally, I wanted to reach Puentedera's redefinition level of technology in my Bible instruction. For this unit, using online sources instead of just reading and testing from the textbook reaches the substitution level. I was able to achieve augmentation by differentiating how I assessed their understanding. Some students shared verbally on videotape, while others preferred to have written reflections on Edmodo. Using Instagrok enabled us to reach modification in this unit by enabling students to do research in new ways. The level of redefinition was reached by the use of VoiceThread. This allowed us to get feedback on our presentations, both locally from our parents and globally with 8th grade students in the Philippines and Colorado. The first goal for students was to identify biblical values that we can see in heroes of faith. In daily devotions, we camped out in different parts of God's words. We started out in Matthew 5, looking at the Beatitudes. We also dug into Romans 12 on showing love, as this was a hallmark of many of our heroes of faith. Because we want these traits to ripen like fruit in our lives, we also picked through the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5. As many of our heroes were able to stand firm in the face of adversity, the spiritual armor in Ephesians 6 showed us our source of strength. Although we ended with traits of holy living exemplified in Colossians 3, students were encouraged to go beyond these and come up with other traits shown in the lives of their hero. The second goal for students was to actually become their hero and share their life stories in a first-person perspective. We studied the word emulate and tried to stay in character. Here is Sophia sharing her interpretation of Amy Carmichael.
Near England. My dream was to please God in the future. God calling me to be a missionary was the answer. My work in India was to care for the smallest, and I shared with them the love of the greatest. Children were abused and lived in terror. It crushed my heart to see their horror. For my whole life I never returned home, and I wrote some books and many a poem. I wrote as the master showed the servant be, and it pierced the feet that follow he. And I wonder, can he have followed far, who has no wound, no scar? So who am I? Can you recall? My name is Amy Carmichael.
We practiced both asking and answering questions in a press conference at the end of each presentation. This was good practice for responding to the questions that we would receive on VoiceThread. Let's listen in on a bit of the press conference from Mary Slessor's presentation.
I didn't get how specifically they do something to the twins.
So they thought having twins was like one was evil and one was like trying to like bring evil spirits. So afterwards, when they thought like they were bad, they would just leave them in the forest right after they were born, and then also the mom would be always like kind of in shame that she gave birth to twins, and then they just abandoned them so that like animals can eat them. Okay.
So like he preached to the tribes like.
Another opportunity for students to show understanding of their character was at the hero breakfast. This was a big hit with the class, although I'm not quite sure how Takehiro and Matsui managed to get an invitation. Billy Graham is opening us up in prayer.
All the heroes were able to come together, we eat together, and please help us with this time on that and with you, and to get to know each other better, and please bless us food into our bodies. In your name we pray.
Our third goal for students was to apply technology to collaborate and communicate. Although I had introduced the use of Instagrok in a previous unit, this was the first time I used the dashboard feature and could keep track of student progress. I was able to easily access the articles they read, and I could see at a glance how the poetry writing was going. Here's Takara telling why he likes Instagrok. Research for this.
It was my first time, second time, but it really helped me to organize my thoughts, and it was easy to take notes.
Okay. We have been using Edmodo all year long, and the students are very familiar with using it. I realized some of my students could express themselves more clearly in writing as opposed to when I videotaped oral reflections. Differentiating on the type of assessment helped students who have different strengths to perform their best. Just give us some of your feedback on this type of project, doing Heroes in Church History, studying it this way. What do you think about this?
Usually, I feel like if we did it this way, everybody would pay attention because they have to actually view the person, which means that they have to research carefully so that when they ask questions, they can reply better. And I think that this way, we'll feel that we're actually there, so it's better than reading a book.
Okay, thanks. Emily, what did you think about this unit?
It was definitely a new experience, but I think compared to just reading in a book, we were able to learn a lot more information and a lot more deeply than what we could have. And even though it was a lot of work and I wouldn't want to do this for every single unit, it was a lot of fun for this church history unit. Great,
thanks. Jeremiah, tell us what you thought about studying it this way.
Well, didn't even say compared to just reading in the textbook and doing a test, it would probably wouldn't be as interesting as actually researching it more personally and actually being that person for the unit. And
okay, Nathan, what did you think about studying it like this?
I think it was a lot better because we had to present it, so we had to creatively think on a way to make other people understand on how we lived and how we were saved to Christ.
All right. This is our third time to use VoiceThread in Bible class this year, but it was our first time to go outside our classroom walls. We shared the link with parents and also with 2 other schools. They are at this time still working on responding, so we will have one more session devoted to replying to their questions. Here's a sample of comments and questions on Mother Teresa's page.
In 1910, I was born and raised in Rome.
As far as how we met our goals, I'm very pleased with my personal goal in meeting the redefinition level of technology. I think we did a great job with the use of VoiceThread and all of the different parts of this project. It was really fun to do, and it added to it well. For the students, I think their strongest area was in applying technology to collaborate and communicate. They did well with that. The areas that I'd like to improve on for next year would be taking more time to help them with applying the biblical values to their lives, their research skills so that they can dig into their character's background deeply enough so that as they emulate their hero, they'll be able to answer questions that are posed to them quickly and with confidence. For myself personally, I need to also say my greatest learning out of Coattail has been able to make this iMovie. I couldn't do this before I started, and it is now finished. Thanks for listening.